Hey folks, I just wanted to do a video today about temperate plant dormancy, and we're at the beginning of November now, and I thought I'd pull out a few plants to kind of showcase what dormancy might look like this time of year. It is different for each plant, for each different type of Sarracenia, different cultivars of Venus flytrap. There's all different types of stages. So let's take a look at this guy right here. This is looks like it's a no ID Sarracenia, but it looks like it has some minor Sarracenia minor in its parentage, with that low-hanging lid. But as you can see, most of these traps are nice and crispy at the top. But I'm not cutting them off just yet because some of them still contain prey in there. There's still stuff in there for them to digest, so I'm going to keep that going for a while until it gets down to here. So if it starts getting dry down to here, then I'll go ahead and cut them off. But as you can see, this isn't eating anymore because this is not connected to the main trunk anyway, so I might as well pull this off and throw it away. But that's what this looks like. It still has a couple of pictures that are still okay. Whereas this one here is a Sarracenia, I think it's cat's VA. Yeah. And it still looks mostly intact. If I'm not mistaken, this has some purpurea in it. But it's mostly intact, and I think it's mostly intact because of the purpurea in it. And let's take a look at the purpurea. This guy is still looking pretty strong, looking pretty fresh. And in fact, I've had purpurea keep their pictures from the previous season all the way through to spring of the next season. But I also live in a slightly warmer climate. I'm in zone, I think 10A or 9B. And so the worst it gets down here is like just a little bit below freezing for a couple weeks of the year. The rest of the time, it rarely dips down to freezing here. We have one dead pitcher right here. You see this? Yeah, it's mostly intact right now. It's already in the good week or so into November. And if we look at Venus flytraps, let's look at this guy here. Which one is this one? This one is, this is an Temperate. This is one of my favorite cultivars, Temperate. It's a nice red cultivar. But you can see most of the traps are dead or dying. And it's mostly the tall traps that are kind of going. The lower traps are seemingly okay, and that tends to be the case most of the time. If a Venus flytrap in my collection is going to keep its traps, they're going to be really low-lying, smaller traps right here. And sometimes it'll die back to nothing. But this guy is well on its way to dormancy, and I'm going to be pulling off these dead traps pretty soon. When you look at a plant like this, this is a gremlin. This is a nice big specimen. I just recently potted it into this tall pot last year, and it's fully grown in. It's got tons of divisions in there by now, I'm sure. And it's just also flowering now, which is off-season flowering, which I should be pulling this out. I already pulled 3 out and planted them earlier. I'm going to do the same with these and see if I can get these to sprout and propagate during the winter. So I'll be doing that shortly. But compared to Carnivorous, this has far fewer dead traps. Although all the tall traps are gone now. The low-lying traps in here are mostly intact, which is really interesting. We'll take another look at a different cultivar. This is Dracula's Cape. This surprisingly produced some big, huge traps this year. This is my first year having this plant since the summer, and I'm just like totally surprised how big these traps have become. But you'll notice the newer traps are very short, barely coming out of the soil. Still a good size, but that trap is almost touching the ground. So that's one of the biggest differences in early traps, midsummer traps, and late traps. The later in the season, the lower the traps grow, and I accidentally triggered that when I pulled the plant out. So yes, even in dormancy, they do trigger, and though I don't recommend feeding your plants in the wintertime, because if you do, they'll often abort the digestion process because it's just too cold. It can't properly digest in the lower temperatures. And so if there was a bug in this trap and it closed and it did this normal thing, the cold weather would probably make it abort, and the trap probably may just die, which isn't the end of the world, because after all, it is dormancy. And so that's the Venus flytrap. Back to Sarracenia. If we take a look over here, these guys are still pretty good. The traps still look pretty nice. This Sarracenia is looking pretty good too. This liquefy, and this one in particular. Look at this. It just doesn't think it's wintertime, man. A nice, big, generous picture mouth here on this liquefy. Anyway, I think I'll then do a little bit closer look at these guys in the next video. All right, let's bring these stems inside, and let me grab my trusty little planting dowel. Go to the living room and into my IKEA cabinet. Excuse me. Oh, just show you real quick. My Madagascariensis is, let me see if I can get this into, there we go. It's doing really well. It's got this big old stem. It's created pup down there. Multiple branches. Beautiful drosser. Anyways, here is, do it up here. This is my little propagation pot over here. I'm not getting it. There we go. Let me move some of my pings back. Alright, that's better. So you can see these three are still green. This one's tip died back. But these two are still pretty green. I'm hoping they'll strike. But I'm gonna create a hole here. Another planting hole here. And here. Go ahead and put those in. These are all gremlin. So I can label that later. Let's get the meristematic tissue into the soil and scrunch it down. And there you have it. Bob's your mother's brother. Now put this back. There we go. And we'll hopefully get some Venus flytrap gremlins growing out of that this winter. Never done this before. We'll see how this goes. Alright, so let's see what to do about these dead traps. So a lot of times when they're fully dead, like down to the roots, you can usually just pull these out. I usually try to pull from the side. And they should come out pretty easy, especially for an established plant like this. I wouldn't do this with a newer plant because there's a chance that you can pull the whole plant out. But for an established plant like this, it's probably okay to just pull, especially if you do it from the side. So I'll do this for all of them here. This one has a little bit more flesh growing on it and stuff. So this one might be tricky. So I'm going to try to get this as low as possible. And then see if I can pull it out. There it goes. A lot of people will just use scissors for this. I will, if need be, but this usually does it for me. And plus, look at all the plants I have. I'm not going to scissor all of them. I just won't have time to do that. But this goes much faster. And this will clean it up a little bit. And the reason I do this is that because I keep mine outside, it's exposed to the rain and the weather and spores and things like that can land on them and start molding, and before you know it, it could spoil the rhizome, which I don't want. So there we go. Easy peasy. It's also kind of meditative. It's already looking pretty nice. This is also a good time to be able to really inspect the plant and see if there's any problems with it. I don't see any huge problems. I see a lot of divisions. And for these harder to reach ones, I'll use a pair of tweezers. That's always helpful to have in your toolkit, a bunch of tweezers. This is a lot easier now than earlier. Like when these started dying, the traps started dying off. It'd be more difficult to do what I'm doing right now because most of the fleshy part of their petioles are still pretty strong and fully intact, and it'd be harder to just yank them out like this. So not a big deal to rush. Oops, I just pulled out a trap. Good one. Oh well. It's getting there. It's already looking much better. Sometimes I'll just deadhead a trap like this one here. I just took the trap off that was black. Also, getting rid of the dead traps and the stems opens up the spaces in between traps too, and that lets a lot more air in, and it's less likely to get that stagnant air that mold and mildew really likes. Yeah, it's looking pretty good now. All right, what do you think? Looking much better. Looks like this one caught something it was eating. I'll leave that on. So there's Temperate ready to go again next spring. And then you look at something like this, Dracula's Cape. These big traps, really dead. They come out so easily, falling off the bone, so to speak. I'm gonna yank this one off too. And while I'm at it, I think, oh look, there's a desiccated fly here that fell out of a trap. Gross. While I'm at it, I'm gonna pull out some of this moss too. Don't want these guys to get a huge foothold, because over the winter this moss will become crazy thick, and don't want that for the next spring, for the new growth to have to fight through all this moss. So I usually just yank it all out whenever I can. It's actually kind of a pest, this moss. It's beautiful, but just gets in the way. I'll leave that Drosera in there, Capensis. Surprisingly, Drosera in my area grow pretty easily in this climate. I need my tweezers for these guys here. There we go. Easy peasy. Oh, I got rid of this Drosera. Let's see if I can replant it. I'll plug it back in after I take out some of this moss. Drosera are surprisingly resilient, and I don't mind hitchhikers in my pots. I know some people do. I don't mind at all. I love it. All right, look at all this crap that I pulled out from the last two plants. And there we go. We got Dracula's Cape all fixed up. All right, let's do one more. This is so fun. All right, this is Gremlin, and I'm just gonna start pulling out by hand. It's weirdly satisfying. But then again, I find everything about carnivorous plants satisfying, so don't listen to me. All right. I'm gonna pull out those flower stalks last. Some of these I'm just gonna deadhead. Later on I'll get rid of the whole stem. Let me shake out some of these flies too. Dead flies, digestive flies are falling out. said, weirdly satisfying. Yeah, a lot of old dead traps underneath. Oh, lots and lots of divisions. I'm probably going to repot this next time around. In the middle of winter, I think. Break this up into individual plants, I think. Oh, this little guy is probably a stem propagation from a flower stalk earlier. All right, that's a whole lot better. All right, let's get rid of those flower stems. So I'm gonna reach down there. Let's get rid of some of these dead plants material. All right, so stem. Let's see if I can get down there. Nice and deep in there. And then I'm going to gently pull. Get as much of the meristematic tissue as I can. Oh yeah, look at that. That was a good pull. Look at all that white tissue. That should strike. So let's see if we can get this other one. Do it the same way. If I can get this in the frame. Down deep and gently pull. It's kind of slippery. All right, another good pull. Nice white meristematic tissue. I'm going to go plant those in just a little bit. Oh, there's a third flower stalk in here. Oh yeah, good one. Let's see, where's my hand? There it is. All right. So there we have it. Most of the dead material pulled out of there anyways. Carnivorous is looking pretty good. Dracula's cape, didn't need to do too much. And this big sucker here, quite a few dead material pulled out. Still more. Look at that. You can get really anal with this stuff. It's so funny. Ah, that's good enough. Look at all this stuff that came out. All right, there we have it. So, winter dormancy for plants, temperate plants like our Venus flytraps and Sarracenia, doesn't necessarily mean they're dead. Well, it doesn't mean they're dead. It means they're just sleeping. And what you'll see is a lot of die-off. A lot of the old traps will die off, the tall summer traps. And you'll be reduced to something like this, where the plant has just very low-lying traps, to sometimes having no traps at all. And it doesn't mean that the plant is dying. It just means that they're going dormant. And it's a lot akin to bears hibernating, or animals that have to hibernate over the winter. It's a way for them to kind of store up their energy for the next spring, to build up for next spring. They're still alive. They still photosynthesize if they still have their leaves, but their growth rate is extremely slow, almost non-existent. But that means in cultivation, in your care, you still have to treat it like it's a living thing. And of course, it still needs water. And so I still have my supply of water here. And anytime one of the trays gets low, I'll go ahead and water them and add in whatever water is needed. And this tray in particular always runs a little dry, and I'm not sure why. I think these Sarracenia drink a lot of water. So this is the one tray that I often have to fill many times during the summertime. Not as much in the winter, and especially when it rains. I'll let the rain fill up the trays, and I'll save on needing to get water. But this is my outdoor water collection over here. One day, I know, I'm going to get an RO system so I don't have to do this. Go to Whole Foods and lug in 26 gallons of water every week, which is how much this table takes during the summer. 26 gallons a week.